it is also a time for us to reflect on our national journey, our democratic institutions, and values that have shaped our republic. It is therefore particularly fitting that we are hosting this conversation on constitutional reform at a moment when the nation itself is reflecting on its governance progress and future direction. For us as a school of communication, this event is both timely and essential. So constitutional reform, as we know, is often perceived primarily as a legal or political undertaking. Yet, at its core, it is also a communication process which requires clarity of language, transparency of intent, engagement with diverse stakeholders, and the responsible mediation of debate, especially through the media. So for us as educators who are training future journalists, who are training strategic communicators, media professionals, and policy advocates, we believe our students must not only report on constitutional issues, but they must also understand them and be equipped to interpret complex issues around them. This engagement is also particularly significant to our colleagues and students in the Faculty of Law, as well as the wider legal fraternity. For our law students, I trust this will be a priceless opportunity to move beyond doctrinal study and engage directly with the reasoning, tensions, and policy considerations that inform constitutional reform. So as a school, we truly hope that this engagement will deepen public appreciation of the committee's findings and recommendations and encourage thoughtful and evidence-based debate and strengthen civic literacy. To students in particular, I urge you to listen actively, to question thoroughly. I wish to say a big thank you again to Dr. Lawrence Kanai, President of Wisconsin International University College, and the management of the university for always supporting our initiatives. Can we give a round of applause to them? Thank you to my HOD, Dr. Emmanuel Isel. Where are you, please, just so we acknowledge you. Thank you, Dr. Isel. And thank you to all my colleague deans who are here. Can I see your hand so we acknowledge you? Thank you. And to all my colleague lecturers and administrative staff at the School of Communication Studies, to your amazing commitment. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To all our guests and partners, we appreciate your presence and your commitment to this meaningful national conversation. It is my sincere hope that this session will challenge us, enlighten us, and ultimately strengthen our shared commitment to democratic progress. Once again, you are warmly welcome. Thank you so much.
Please, another round of applause for the Dean, who has formally welcomed us. Yes, we'll also take some remarks from the President of the institution, again with another round, and a good one, to Dr. Lawrence Kanai, who will share some few words with us.
Thank you very much, our MC, and good evening to everybody. It's good to see people we have been watching at a distance. I'm sure some of you are like me. We only see them on the screens. We don't meet them. And I'm sure my friend here and brother, he doesn't know that he has an uncle who has been monitoring him all the day, all the time. And on Saturdays, we don't miss you. Thank you. And of course, Prof, since the committee was formed, we've been hearing, seeing you, and for me, it's quite delightful to see you face to face. I'm sure I have seen you somewhere, but we have never interacted before. and of course my uh, uh, law faculty, who is acting as the representative dean. But for me, I would like to stand on the protocol established by my dean and to only acknowledge the presence of our distinguished speaker and moderator for this occasion. Of course, the council chair, my colleague deans, students, and also our media friends who are here. We are grateful that you've had time to be with us. It is my great pleasure to warmly welcome you to Wisconsin International University College this evening, particularly for the purpose of this public lecture, which is entitled 2025 Review of Ghana's Constitution, Findings and Way Ahead. The Constitution probably is older than many of you at the back, the students. You know, 1992, we are talking of 30-something years. It's too old, and of course, this should be the right time to look at it and determine the way forward. This lecture could not have come at a more opportune time as Ghanaians undertake a comprehensive review of the 1992 Constitution. National conversations around governance, accountability, citizenship, and democratic consolidations have become more urgent than ever. It is therefore both timely and relevant that an academic institution like ours should be deeply involved and create a necessary platform for sober reflection, expert analysis, and public education on this historic national exercise. At Wisconsin, we see ourselves not merely as a teaching university, but a civic institution with responsibility to contribute meaningfully to Ghana's constitutional and democratic development. I wish to commend the School of Communication Studies for their consistent effort in organizing high-profile, intellectually stimulating public engagements. Only recently, the school hosted a manifesto and policy discussion with the then presidential candidate and now our president to have candid discussions a few months earlier before the election. The school brought to this campus one of the Ghana's most respectful or respected business leaders recently in the name of Sir Sam Jonah to share insights on leadership, enterprise, and national development. These initiatives are not ceremonial events. They are critical learning tools for our students of communication, and in fact, the entire student body, even though the dean mentioned the law school students in particular. These discussions expose students to real policy debates, national actors, and contemporary issues, thereby breaching the gap between classroom theory and the practical world of public communication and civic engagement. I'm particularly proud that the Wisconsin has within its academic community one of the most distinguished figures in journalism and communication, Professor Kwame Karikari, who is also a member of the Constitutional Review Committee. It is certain that he's part of getting the committee chairman to us this evening. So we are grateful to you, Prof. His instrumental role in organizing engagements such as a lecture cannot be unnoticed. I also wish to acknowledge our distinguished moderator for today's lecture, the renowned media personality, award-winning journalist, and host of News File, Samson Ladi Ayinimi. In fact, the name was spelled wrongly in our thing. It's Ayinimi, which is M-I at the end, not N-I. So we need to take note of that. We are deeply honored to have you on our campus this evening. I'm sure many of the students would be the first time to interact with you and to see you face to face. Ladies and gentlemen, just last week, the university hosted Alfred Okansi of TV3, who hosts Ghana Tonight and Key Points. Today we are welcoming Samson Ladi Ayinimi, host of Joy TV's News File. These are arguably two of the most influential current affairs and political programs in Ghana today. Their presence here within the space of 1 week is a clear demonstration of Wisconsin's commitment to exposing students to the best minds and voices shaping public discourse in the country. Our special gratitude goes to the distinguished speaker, Professor Kwame Prempeh, for whose invaluable service Ghana for graciously accepting our invitation to speak at Wisconsin this evening. Professor Prempeh's contribution to constitutional law and governance in Ghana is well known and widely respected. And we are confident that today's lecture will greatly enrich our understanding of the constitutional review process and the road ahead. We sincerely hope that both Professor Prempeh and our moderator, Samson Ladi Ayinimi, will allow the students of Wisconsin to benefit not only from scholarly insight, but also from their rich professional experiences in law, journalism, and constitutional governance. In conclusion, let me once again commend the Dean of the School of Communication Studies, our own Professor Kari, who has been mentoring the school, the dean, and the faculty, and the organizers for making this important event possible. May today's lecture inspire thoughtful dialogue, deepen civic consciousness, and strengthen our collective commitment to the constitutional future of our dear nation, Ghana. On this note, I warmly welcome you all to this public lecture and wish us a fruitful and engaging discussion. Thank you very much.
Can we please let us go? Thank you, Dr. Nag, for affirming the university's role in civic discourses in this country. So again, a few persons to acknowledge, and we have in our midst an ambassador. He's an ambassador in residence, and we have Ambassador Dr. William Branful. He's also a lecturer here at Wisconsin International University College. We also have the university's auditor here, Ni Amasa Jani. Thank you. And then to cap it off for this round, the Dean of the Business School, Dr. Bright Maudo. So certainly an event like this needs someone to sit in the chair. And we looked in the community and we found someone who fits this role. At this point, I'll ask one of our students, Hulda, to kindly come forward and introduce the chair for this event. Let's encourage Huda with a clap. Encourage your fellow student, please.
Good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen. So it is a great opportunity for me. I would like to thank Dean of the Communication School, Madam Baba Kofi, for this opportunity. I do not take it for granted. So today I have the opportunity to introduce our chairman. So he is a lawyer and a lecturer of jurisprudence in financial markets. He is the author of the following books: The Value of Oxford Bank to the Global Financial Markets, Exchange Traded Funds, Inflation Targeting, and Currency Stability and Countries' Prosperity. His research interest involves role that banks must play in societies, currencies, inflation, models, and the economic growth, and jurisprudence for optimum governance. He earned his JSD, Doctor of Science of Law degree from Thomas Jefferson School of Law in San Diego in California. And he was inducted into Delta Mu Delta, an international honor society in business administration, Beta Upsilon chapter in April 2007 in New York in the United States. So ladies and gentlemen, giving honor to whom honor is due, let's welcome our chairman, Dr. John E. Baden. Please, let's continue clapping for him.
Good evening to you all. WIUC President, Acting Dean of the School of Communication Studies, distinguished guest speaker, the Chairperson of the Constitution Review Committee, the Moderator, colleagues, students, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is such a pleasure to serve as Chairperson for this important lecture titled 2025 Review of Ghana's Constitution, Findings and the Way Forward, or the way ahead. Okay. Constitutional review signifies one of the most important exercises in any democratic society. It invites us to reflect on how governing framework is functioning and whether it continues to reflect the aspirations, values, and practical realities of our nation. Today's conversation are therefore not only about legalities, but they have civic importance. For a university community, and particularly for students and scholars of law and communication, I believe this engagement offers a valuable opportunity to cross-examine the ideas, the reasoning behind reform proposals, and ultimately understand the broader implication for governance and democratic accountability. We are therefore privileged to have with us the Chairperson of the Constitution Review Committee to share insights from the committee's work and to engage in open dialogue with us. I thank our distinguished guest and moderator, the son of the soil, for honoring our invitation. I look forward to this rich engagement and will come back with my closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Baden. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the moment we've been waiting for. I researched a bit and found out that he doesn't pronounce his first name. He only writes the alphabet, H. Just like me, I have a first name which I don't pronounce, but please permit me to tell the world that your H is Henry. Henry Kwesi Prempeh has been the executive director of the Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD, since 2019. having previously served as its first Director of Legal Policy and Governance and a founding member of its governing body. From 2003 to 2015, he was a tenured professor at Seton Hall University School of Law in New Jersey in the USA. There, he taught courses and seminars in corporate law, American constitutional law, and comparative constitutional design, among others. Professor Prempeh was a visiting professor at Gimpa Law School in 2010 and has been a visiting professor since 2014 at the Central European University in Budapest, Hungary. There, he co-teaches a summer course on constitution building in Africa. His international work includes serving as a constitutional advisor to the UN Special Envoy to Yemen in connection with the design and writing of a post-conflict constitution for the Middle Eastern country. He also consults on constitutional reforms in South Sudan and the Gambia. And he's serving on multiple institutions as a resource person, including the Kenyan Supreme Court on constitutional and election education matters. Professor Prempeh practiced as an attorney in Washington, D.C. with two of America's leading international law firms, namely Old Melveny and Myers LLP, and Cleary, Gottlieb, Steen, and Hamilton. Prof. Prempeh holds a Juris Doctor from Yale School, where he was appointed a Coker Fellow and served as editor and notes editor of the Yale Law Journal. He also holds an MBA from Baylor University in Texas and a BSc admin degree from the University of Ghana Business School. Professor Prempeh was awarded the Order of the Volta in 2023 for his role as special counsel to the Attorney General of Ghana in connection with the Ghana-Cote d'Ivoire maritime boundary delimitation case, which was determined in Ghana's favor in 2017. He served on the Ghana Law Reform Commission from 2017 to 2024. In January 2025, Professor Prempeh was appointed by His Excellency, President John Dramani Mahama, as chairman of the Constitution Review Committee with a mandate to lead the 8-member team to review and propose actionable recommendations for amendments to the 1992 Constitution of Ghana. The committee submitted its final report to the President on January 29, 2026. Tonight, Prof. Prempeh will share findings from that historic process and help us understand what Ghana's democratic future could and should look like. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please, let's show our love and welcome Prof with a resounding applause. Let's do it as he walks here.
The president of the university, the chair of council, dean of the School of Communications, the chair of the occasion, my fellow committee member, Professor Kakari, distinguished guests, my good friend, the moderator, Samson, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for this invitation to share with you here at Wisconsin International University my thoughts and reflections on the assignment that my committee just concluded. This would be my first such appearance at an academic institution following the completion of our national assignment. So you are giving me an opportunity here to use you as guinea pigs. Sorry. To really reflect, this is the first opportunity I'm really having to do a reflection in an academic setting of the work that we have just concluded. It took us pretty much the whole year, because we were inaugurated on January 28th or thereabouts of last year, and we submitted our final report on January 29th of this year. So almost a year to the date. We had submitted an interim report in December, which contained only the main recommendations. So it was an abbreviated report running some 100 and something pages to the presidency. That report was shared with the public. I think almost immediately we submitted it. Then we were allowed time to basically put together the final report, which essentially contains the findings, the context, the background to the recommendations, the reasoning and everything. That ran to some 690 or pages, which we submitted not too long ago. So what, the topic invites me to reflect on the findings and the way forward. But let me start by, well, we encountered this, this question quite frequently in our engagements. And when we submitted the first report, following some of the engagements on social media, it was also a question that continued to come up, which is, what's this year 2025 necessary at all, right? So I call that a skeptical view, right? So the skeptical view reflecting those who answer that question in the negative, right? And I think it's important for us to take on board whatever the objections of the skeptics are when they ask whether or not the review exercise was necessary at all. And the opinion on that, I think I can explain, or I can look at it from three different angles, right? There are those who say the Constitution has served us well. And this is almost I'm almost quoting them. This is a common refrain that you hear. It's almost like, if it ain't broke, like the Americans say, don't fix it. And for them, this Constitution has done us good. It's really not broken. We are standing as a country where we've made stable progress. And so what's the point of tinkering with the foundational document around which the governance of this country is organized? So the Constitution has served us well. And you hear this view most commonly from political insiders, the members of the political class, including some partisan foot soldiers. And I do not say this in a disparaging way. I mean, they are most proximate to the document. They work it on a daily basis. And in their view, it's working just fine. Now, in the beginning, this view was somewhat one-sided. You know, once upon a time, one side of the political class held the view that the Constitution was written for one man, which one man was commonly understood to be a reference to the late President Jerry John Rawlings. However, I noticed that as the two main factions of the political class have taken turns tasting political power, this view of the Constitution as having been written just for one man now finds little support within the political class. So now there appears to be bipartisan consensus within influential elements of the political class that the Constitution has served us well. It's not only a one-sided view. And I think we should take on board that view and try to digest it. Those who believe the Constitution has served us well cite or make reference to various pieces of evidence to back their claim. Notably, the 1992 Constitution is indeed the longest lasting constitution in the history of Ghana, having been in force for an unbroken 33 years. Under it, Ghana has experienced unprecedented political stability, generally peaceful turnover of power multiple times between rival political parties through the ballot box, and respect for presidential term limits. This is significant, something that in our neighborhood and the rest of Africa is not common to find. Nobody has attempted to evade presidential term limits in Ghana, no party, no president, and this is really a remarkable achievement if you consider the number of times that we encounter incidents of presidential term evasions or attempts to elongate presidential term limits in other African countries. So indeed, these are non-trivial achievements for the country, for a country that used to be really known for the frequency of its coups d'etat. So it is indeed, I think, fair to say that Ghana has scored important achievements since embarking on this constitutional journey in January of 1993. But is the 1992 Constitution itself responsible for any of this? Our immediate past democratic constitutions, namely the 1979 and 1969 constitutions, were arguably superior in content to the 1992 Constitution, and in fact contained very many of the same provisions we find in the 1992 Constitution. Presidential term limits, anti-coup d'etat and anti-one-party state provisions, provisions on supremacy of the Constitution, judicial review, the Bill of Rights. These are not new to the 1992 Constitution. Yet neither the 1969 Constitution nor the 1979 Constitution lasted even one term. Right? So they had inferior documents. They had many of the same things we celebrate the 1992 Constitution for, and yet they did not last one term. So can we then say that the longevity of the 1992 Constitution is basically based on the 1992 Constitution itself? My argument here is that the longevity of the 1992 Constitution is not proof of the intrinsic superiority of the Constitution itself over its short-lived predecessors. A number of exogenous or external factors, or factors external to the Constitution itself, might explain why this Constitution has outlasted all the previous ones. There may be many reasons. One of them, I think, is that we are probably simply tired of coups d'etat, right? Having exhausted, and we've given the soldiers many opportunities to exhaust themselves, right? And I think they themselves are tired too. But I think it also helps that the last military junta that transitioned us into the constitutional moment or period turned itself also into a political party, and therefore has been able to experience working within a constitutional framework, right? And it helps when people who once probably may have thought that the Constitution was something that they could easily disregard, now have to govern within constraints of a constitution to experience the difficulties, right? You begin to appreciate what it is that constitutional governance might be. So I think that there are other factors external to the Constitution, including the fact that we may have exhausted our Constitution and we've had coup d'etat fatigue, and so have come to a conclusion that this is the only game in town, for better or worse, this is how we're going to prosecute it. Secondly, I think constitutional longevity itself does not mean constitutional or political maturation, right? You can live or last long without maturing or giving up certain bad habits and behaviors. 33 unbroken years of constitutional rule have not improved the quality or capacity, for example, of our political parties, some would say. It has not necessarily made them more democratic or more representative. It has not made our parliament stronger or a better check on the executive. It has not addressed problems of political or bureaucratic or judicial corruption. So a number of the problems that we had at the beginning and even prior to the Constitution continue to live with us, which means that merely because the Constitution has been around for a long time, 33 years, does not mean that it has allowed us an opportunity to get over these problems or some of these habits within our politics. Moreover, I think when politicians and political insiders say the Constitution has served us well, we should ask them, who are they talking about? Right? Are they talking about themselves as a class, or are they talking about the generality of the population, the nation as a whole? Of course, beyond delivering stable peace, and we all enjoy it, when there is stability, it inures to the benefit of everybody in the country. Beyond delivering stable peace to all of us as citizens, have we all as citizens also experienced prosperity and development equally or even equitably? There is no doubt that the Fourth Republic has delivered remarkable prosperity, but has it been equally shared, say, between the political class and the citizenry, for us to be able to say that the Constitution or the Fourth Republic has served us all well? So I think, yes, it's done some very good things for us, but I think merely because it has lasted this long should not make us complacent or make us feel that there is no work to be done. Then there's a second school of thought, again coming from the same skeptical view, which says the Constitution is not the problem. The problem is not the Constitution, it is the people. And by the people, they mean sometimes the operators of the Constitution, sometimes they mean the citizens, but often both of us, right? Both the citizens and the operators of the Constitution. In other words, whatever problems we are encountering, we continue to encounter within our constitutional framework, according to this view, is a problem of political leadership and political followership, right? The people and their governors just have a problem, right? You have to fix the Ghanaian, fix yourself. When you say fix the Ghanaian, you go and fix yourself, right? Now, this claim or observation is not one to be dismissed lightly. Political leadership, and for that matter, political followership, indeed matter. A good constitution in the hands of bad leaders or bad citizen followers cannot produce good outcomes. But just because political leadership as well as political followership matters, does not mean constitutions or constitutional design does not matter. The attempt to frame the issue as a choice between a good constitution and good leaders, or good leaders, as strong institutions in the Obama formulation versus strong leaders, I think presents us with a false dichotomy. Just the choice does not have to be binary. It does not have to be either or. Both, in my view, are important. But I would argue that first, a good leader needs a good constitution to complement his or her leadership. A constitution that understands human nature, understands that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and anticipating this makes sure that power is appropriately constrained, regulated, public interest, is my idea of a constitution. No matter how good a leader you have, if you give that leader a winner-takes-all constitution, a constitution without limits on their power, you are going to get winner-takes-all outcomes in your governance and politics. That, in some important respects, is one of the sins of the 1992 Constitution. Some have argued that it is too permissive, and for that matter, not regulatory or constraining enough with the power it grants to our political leaders or our political class. And indeed, I happen to share this view, and I've observed elsewhere that the 1992 Constitution confers on the President of Ghana far more power than any good president needs and far more power than any bad president must have. Right? You don't need that much power to govern this place well. And yet, once you are donated so much power, the likelihood of abuse is always there. If not by yourself, by somebody who you would delegate that power to. So indeed, a good constitution is important for constraining or taming even bad leaders, right? The other problem with framing the issue or blaming our political and governance problems on the people, on us, not the constitution, is that it leaves the dead end of escapism or fatalism. It gives us an excuse to do nothing. Because we can't really change the nature or caliber of the people, of the mass of the people. There is no script, no patent for inventing a Lee Kuan Yew in Ghana. We don't know how to replicate this person here, right? What we can change with relative ease are the rules of the game, the framework of institutional incentives within which normal mortals, normal Ghanaians must operate, right? It's not that we shouldn't work on improving leadership, but that we cannot make that the precondition. We cannot wait on that. Whatever it is that it's wrong with us as the people, whatever it is, however it is that we're going to produce good leaders, we must work on what it is that we can, which is the Constitution. But acknowledging that constitutions too matter enables us to do an honest and comprehensive diagnosis to see where and in what ways we can reform the rules of the game or the Constitution in our quest to gain better governance outcomes. Now, being in support of a view of the Constitution, right? I mean, being in support of a review of the Constitution as bad. That is not to say that the Constitution we have now is bad. It means only that experience has revealed and taught us that certain problems in our political and national life as a country change to the Constitution, whether or not those problems arise from the Constitution itself or arise from elsewhere. Not an admission that the Constitution is bad. It just means that experience over time of practicing this Constitution has taught us some lessons. Those lessons may be governance lessons, political lessons, developmental lessons, and all we're trying to do in a constitutional review is to see if, even if the problem does not arise from the Constitution, can the Constitution help us to deal with that problem? Sometimes the Constitution, the text may be the problem, right? Because we have also practiced the Constitution. Judges have made pronouncements on them. We know how this is working. This provision is working. That provision is not working. Sometimes those provisions are problematic, and we may use the review opportunity to change them. But sometimes the text is fine, right? But there are governance problems nonetheless. And so when we go to do a constitutional review, it is not to say necessarily that the Constitution is bad. It can be part of the solution or part of the problem. Either way, it makes a review important. Then there is, I would call, the last of these skeptical views, which we encountered, then focus on the 2022 exercise itself. And that objection, that skeptical view says, we have done constitution review before. Nothing came of it, so why do another one? In fact, we've done more than one, right? We did one in 2010, the report of which was presented in 2011, almost running into 1,000 pages. And then we did a second one, a small, maybe limited one in 2023, 2024. Sorry, I have a bit of a cold. The report, the last process was handed over to the going government for the outgone government before they left, and then handed over to the current government. So we've done this before. Why do we need another CRC? And as with the other skeptical views, I think this too is a fair and legitimate question. Why did the 2011 report, for example, not see the light of day? Many believe it's political inertia. I happen to believe that there were other factors at play. Just look at the timing of it. Right? 2011, when the report was presented in December, shortly thereafter, 2012 election year, had to do constitutional review of any kind in an election year. And then the president passed on. Further complicating matters, right? So election year 2012, nobody is going to prioritize constitutional review, right? And then once the election was over, what happened? 8 months of litigation on who won the election. So 2013, 8 months gone, and by the time that was over, the country was hugely polarized politically, right? You need cross-party or party consensus to do constitutional review successfully, to implement constitution. You cannot do it the one project. So if at the time you are ready to implement, your rivals are not talking to you, the relationship is so damaged that political consensus is difficult to engineer between the two rival factions of the political class. It becomes really difficult to move on with the process. And then I recall that there was also litigation just around that time questioning the legality of the process. That also meant some delay in court until the judgment came down. Something, what was the year the judgment came? 2015 or thereabouts, 14. The Asari case, one of the Asari cases, right? So there were a number of intervening factors. And I think the last one also was a technical constraint with how to process the report for implementation, which is that the report had come up with lots of recommendations for reform, for amendment. Many of them implicated entrenched provisions. The entrenched provisions are those provisions in the Constitution you can only change by going to a referendum. Now, if you are proposing to change 20, 30, 40 provisions that are entrenched, how exactly are you going to process them through a referendum? Because you can't ask against one simple question and say, do you say yes or no to these 20 proposals? Because they are unrelated. So you must basically single them out. And how many referenda can you actually go through? And the cost of the referendum itself, you have to consider, right? At least 40% of the population must participate in that referendum in terms of turnout, and they must approve it by 75%. That's what the Constitution says. So once you have a long list of entrenched provisions recommended for change, there is a huge technical constraint you have to overcome. And that was also one difficulty the 2011 Constitution faced. So I think in defense of either the authors of the Constitution or the expected implementers, I would say that it wasn't entirely their fault, right? There was just a certain constellation of circumstances at the time that made it difficult to take that Constitution forward. So then the question then is, okay, now that all of those problems may not be there, why don't you just go and dust off the 2011 report and implement it, right? Now the time is, maybe you can do it now. And why do you have to worry Professor Kwam Kakari and bring and all these people on the committee again, do this? But I think that if we were to do that, if we just dusted off the 2011 report, we would have lost 14 good years of additional experience and lessons during the intervening period. Because 2011 to now, many things have changed that were not there at the time the 2011 report was submitted. And these are developments of constitutional significance. Let me just run through a few of them. I already mentioned that at the time the committee report was submitted, December 2011 was submitted to the late President John Atta Mills. He subsequently passed on in 2012. So at the time the report was submitted, we had not even had the experience of succession to the presidency and the position of vice president following a vacancy in the office of president caused by the death of a sitting president. That's an important experience. How does it affect the way we think about those provisions? Did they work well? Did they not work well? You have to think through them. 2 presidential election petitions have occurred since then. One in 2013, the other in 2021. How those petitions were adjudicated, remember the first one took us 8 months. We learned from that, and then the next time around, we made sure it wasn't that long. So you learn from these experiences. And so maybe somebody coming to do a constitutional review would look at that and say, well, should we do something about the length of time it takes to resolve a dispute? Because remember, the country is on tenterhooks. I mean, when you have the only office with executive authority in the land, uncertain and contested for 8 months, that's a problem, right? So those 2 experiences are important. Then we've had other experiences. The Supreme Court, for example, rules in 2016 that a provision of the Constitution stating that the president shall act on the advice of the Judicial Council in appointing a justice of the Supreme Court did not impose an obligation on the president to act as advised. That's an important decision. What are the implications for that next time around you want to fix the Constitution in terms of the nature of appointment process for judges? At the time, in 2016, we had never had the experience of Article 146. Article 146 had never been used. Since then, it's been used twice. In 2018, it was used to remove the chairperson and 2 deputies of the Electoral Commission and to replace them following a change in party turnover in government. And most recently, the same Article 146 has been used following a changeover, a party turnover in government, to also remove constitutionally a Chief Justice. So these are experiences that if you are coming to do this task now, you can't just take the 2011 report that didn't have the benefit of this experience and say we're just using it without reflecting on these things. We have also had a hung parliament, something we call a hung parliament, where we got close to having a situation where one party controlled parliament and the other party controlled the executive. We didn't quite get there, but it was close by one member of parliament, an independent member of parliament. And the opposition party got control of the speakership. This again is new. 2011, we didn't know that that could happen. So when you have a constitution, for example, think about this. When you have a constitution that says that the majority of ministers must be appointed from within parliament, among members of parliament, maybe those who wrote it thought the president's party will always have a majority in parliament. Because if they didn't think so, how on earth could they have assumed that you could have a majority of your ministers from that parliament if they were on the minority side, right? So some of these things have allowed us, have given us an opportunity to reflect, right? We scheduled a referendum to amend an entrenched provision of the Constitution to allow for the election of mayors, MMDCEs in 2019. We didn't get bipartisan consensus, so it was aborted. That's an experience you take into account, right? So on and on and on, there are a number of things that we have experienced. The president directs Auditor General to go on accumulated leave. We challenge the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says it's unconstitutional. Good. So then Ghana defaults on its sovereign debt for the first time, 2022. Is this a matter for constitutional review? Absolutely. There's an entire chapter of the Constitution on finance where it talks about revenue and taxation and debt and a number of things. So if you are going to review a constitution in 2025, then what happened in 2022 with our sovereign debt default matters for the constitutional review. It may not have mattered, you may not have thought about it at all in 2011, right? So I'm saying all this to say that a number of experiences have happened, including the fact that you have a new Gen Z generation, right? If we had implemented the 2011 constitution, it probably may not have taken into account your views about governance in Ghana. And now you have matured in the intervening period to have particular opinions because you have experienced governance differently. from the other generation. So we must probably give you an opportunity to also reflect on this. And then I think at the time we're doing the review in 2025, some interesting phenomenon was also developing in the region, the return of coups d'etat. And you cannot ignore it, right? No matter how you feel about it, you cannot ignore the fact that countries that also made the transition to democracy roughly at the same time as we did are now returning to coups d'etat. So it makes you sit up and say, what's wrong with the democracy? Is there something about it that's not working? How might we fix ours so that we avert a return to the coup d'etat, right? So these things really also put us on notice that if you were going to do constitutional review in 2025, you can't just dust off the old report and assume that it would answer the questions of the moment, that it would do justice to the issues of this moment. So what would we learn or find from the constitutional review process? I think the first general observation, and this is largely personal, is that the committee, I think, found a high degree of interest among Ghanaians, both elite and just the regular folk like us, that the country needed fundamental change to the way it is governed. In our travels across the country, our rooms were filled to capacity, sometimes this kind of capacity, often larger, by everyday people who came to really express their opinion very passionately and enthusiastically about how they were experiencing governance. And the story was not very good. The experience was not very good, right? So I think on the basis of the stakeholder and wider public engagement that we had, we observed that there was strong citizen demand for constitutional review. And that included the engagements we had in Accra. We started in Accra with stakeholder engagements, which were limited, you would say, to the elite class. So we met people who had worked the Constitution very closely, all former presidents who were around, vice president, chief of staff, chief justice, former speaker, current speaker, majority leader, parties, all of that. Right? We met public servants and others who had worked the Constitution from within the public services and in various capacities. We met civil society groups that really work these issues, media personalities, those who were proximate to the corridors of power and who have seen the Constitution operate at close quarters. And I think we could say that uniformly, the sense was that Ghana was ripe for constitutional review, that we needed a different kind of governance. The country needed to be governed differently, right, and better. But there were some more specific findings that I think I would like to share. One is that from our experience, I think Ghanaians want more than a change in the parties and leaders that govern us. Ghanaians want a change in the quality and the outcomes of governance. We like democratic elections and all, but we are dissatisfied with governance and developmental outcomes. And I think this is a very crucial point, right? The fact that changing leaders and parties does not appear to lead to substantive and sustainable change in the material conditions of the people is an important finding of this exercise. People voice frustration with the fact that they go through this ritual of elections enthusiastically every 4 years, and then they don't see much change in the material conditions of the people themselves. They may see visible change in the material conditions and fortunes of the political classes, many people said so, but not in theirs, right? And this is consistent with a recurring finding from Afrobarometer surveys in Ghana, which is that Ghanaians like democracy, they like the freedom of speech, they like to call radio, they like the fact that we have free media, they like to go and queue to elect leaders, and they prefer democracy to all the other authoritarian alternatives. When we do Afrobarometer, which CDD does in Ghana, we ask them these questions. Year in, year out, consistently Ghanaians strongly like democracy. But what we have also found is that Ghanaians are dissatisfied with democracy and with its outcomes. So Afrobarometer has coined this phrase, and this is not a Ghana-specific finding. It's a finding across many African countries that have gone democratic. That citizens like democracy, but they are expressing dissatisfaction with democracy. So Afrobarometer calls them that Africans are dissatisfied Democrats, and Ghanaians are included in that class. So what we observe was that Ghanaians do not want a choiceless democracy, right? Where changing the faces and parties in power brings little change in social, economic, or political development and material prosperity for the people. Ghanaians want change that solves perennial problems like galamsey, like doomsaw, like lack of public transportation, like sanitation problem, like joblessness, corruption, not just manage them for the next 4 or 8 years. That's the kind of sentiment that we were picking up. A second related finding is that Ghanaians expressed opinion that they are tired of this winner-take-all system of politics. A system where the party whose candidate wins control of the presidency essentially gets to capture the state and corner and control all the job opportunities, contracts, scholarships, other public opportunities for the benefit of its party members and those connected to them. Essentially, we've gotten to a situation where our multi-party democracy is essentially one-party state in 8-year rotations, right? Whichever party wins power governs the country solo to the exclusion of the other for the next 4 or 8 years. So it's almost like you are running a one-party state, except that you change the party every 8 years. And Ghanaians expressed deep frustration with that kind of system. A third finding is that Ghanaians want better or more effective political representation and participation beyond just voting in elections once every 4 years. And they want this at both the national and the local levels. At the local level, Ghanaians expressed a preference to see a more responsive and accountable local government, including notably an opportunity to elect their own MCEs or DCEs, although they remain divided or ambivalent as to whether to do so on partisan or non-partisan lines. At the national level, citizens feel that MPs do not engage them or their constituency level problems enough or frequently enough in the period in between elections. Many Ghanaians feel shut out of the legislative process, with several pieces of legislation passed routinely on the blind side of citizens and interested stakeholders. Oftentimes you get up and you say, oh, Parliament just passed a law on Okada. Nobody knows what the law on Okada says. But this Okada affects us intimately every day. Affects us as pedestrians, affects us as road users, affects us as consumers. So it appears that once we elect MPs, we just basically go to sleep, or they assume that we have given them a license to go and legislate for us without reference back to us for the next 4 years. And they don't come back to us. Often they pass laws we don't know about. Only they and the executive know exactly what they are passing. So Ghanaians express some frustration that basically there's a disconnect between their representatives depending where in the constitution that is, they can't tell you, right? But that's how they feel, that's how they experience it, that the president has an outsized role, larger than life presence within our system, and that this larger than life presidency makes it difficult for other state institutions to stand up for themselves or to check and balance executive power. Ghanaians were also, and this is actually quite interesting. I mean, while I was driving here, there was this news on the air about Reuters reporting that China and the US and other countries are putting pressure on Ghana not to increase our royalty, some new sliding scale thing that we are introducing, right? And it goes to this sentiment that was expressed by, including by a number of elite stakeholders, that Ghana needs to get more from our natural resource endowment. That the country and its people are not benefiting from our natural resource endowment. And that was a recurring theme in our engagements. We note that the discovery of oil and gas took place in the Fourth Republic, right? And the expectations around them have not panned out. The number of people who thought that it was going to be transformational, it was going to really, make a big leap, help us make a big leap into the next stage of the developmental ladder, that has not happened. So Ghanaians think we should get more from our resources. Ghanaians also expressed frustration with the disruptions and discontinuities in policies, programs, and projects, and for that matter, in development priorities and goals that occur whenever power changes from one government or party to the other. So there is this growing yearning, growing demand that we need to see greater cross-party consensus on the country's development strategy, trajectory, and priorities. Sometimes it's expressed as, we want to have a national development plan in which all the parties can buy in. Right? That is the idea that Ghanaians, I think, we should be getting more. Thank you. And let me, the last finding, Ghanaians do not like the way our political parties operate. They don't like the high cost of politics, of political financing, the amount of money that goes into our politics. They find it exclusionary. It discriminates against the youth, against regular middle class people who don't have loads of money. It discriminates against women. They find that the political access is closing and that the parties, the amount of money that is entering our politics is excluding large numbers of people from access to politics. So what's the way forward? Well, we approached the constitution review process as a problem-solving exercise, right? So we were not going to do, we didn't go through it legalistically and say, well, how can we improve this text or that text? Or, of course, if there was an opportunity to fix something, you would do it. But basically, we wanted to see to what extent could we use the constitution to solve some of these problems that people had identified. So we broke down the constitution roughly into two. Right? Our understanding of the Constitution is that this is what sets the rules of the game, right, of politics and governance. It's one way of describing the Constitution is it sets the rules of the game. Every game that you play must have rules. To govern a country, to have a state, you have to have rules about how you distribute power, who gets power, who doesn't get it, how you use power, how you do all of those things. The Constitution is that kind of document. It sets the rules of the game. But there are two different kinds of rules, right? The first for any game is rules of entry and exit, right? So whether it's football or basketball or whatever, you have to have rules about who qualifies to participate in the game, how they qualify, and when they leave the game, when they must leave the game, when time is up for you to leave, and when you change those things, right? So those are the rules of entry and exit. Then once you have gotten onto the game and sat at the table to play the game, there are the rules of play. How do you play the game itself once you have been qualified to get onto the table, right? So whether it's Owari or Dummy or whatever, once you are at the table, how do you play it? And our finding was that we have done generally quite well with rules of entry and exit, right? Which is really more or less saying that the democracy part of the game, the competition, the political competition part, the term limits, the elections, we've done fairly well as a country, given our past and given our aspirations. We've not done poorly. So the rules of entry and exit are not that bad, right? The Constitution as rules of entry and exit are fine. Nothing to change about term limits, about the regularity of elections, and those things. But rules of play, once you get into the game, how power is distributed, who gets power, who gets to use what, who checks what, who doesn't check what. That is essentially where we found that we had problems, mostly. We had some rules of entry and exit problems, like, for example, how we finance parties. The fact that we campaign almost 24/7, 4 years. The moment you lose an election, next day, you are campaigning for the next one. In some countries that we are familiar with, Senegal among them, other countries in Africa, there is almost like an election season. It's like a fishing season. When they don't open the campaign, you can't campaign. right? So I remember visiting Dakar in the last elections, about 3 weeks before the last elections, and you would not see a single billboard, no poster, no jingles, because campaign season had not, crank had not been rung. They had not rang the bell for campaign to start. So there's a defined period for you to campaign. And, we think that's something that's important. That we would love to have something like that here, so that we give time for governance, so that people we elect don't spend their time from day one trying to get to re-election, that they have time to govern, to exercise the power that we've given them. So in terms of rules of entry and exit, our proposals are mostly around political parties, making them more inclusive, more democratic, reducing campaign financing, regulating money in politics so that access is increased, and also regulating the campaign period. So we have some proposals around that. The rules of play is where we spend most of our time. And here, the rules are around presidential powers, the president's appointment powers, president's relationship with legislatures, with the parliament, local government and decentralization, public sector governance, state-owned enterprises, never been part of the Constitution. We are proposing for the first time that state-owned enterprises, they've always been excluded from the Constitution because they are considered of a commercial nature. And we're saying it shouldn't matter they're of a commercial nature. It means that we should regulate them differently from, say, the civil service. We can't have the same Public Services Commission taking care of some of their things. But we need to keep an eye on state-owned enterprises because about 20% of our GDP goes through them. And this is huge money, right? So we are proposing major reforms in public sector governance in the way in which we select the people who are the CEOs and managers of these state resources and how we remove them, so that we don't go through these cycles. Every year there's a change of our government. You just throw, whether the person is good or bad, you just throw them out and you bring your partisan there. We are making a lot of proposals there. Natural resource governance. We are making important proposals in the way our natural resources are governed, including public lands. So currently there is this idea that all public resources are vested in the president as trustee on behalf of the people of Ghana. The meaning of that was tested in court, in the High Court once, and the High Court says we can't enforce that against the president. So normally when you do obligations to the citizens or trust beneficiaries, you must make reports to them, you must tell them how the resources are being used, all of those things. We can't do that now. And it was interesting that it took one former president who said, look, that provision, take it out, it's not good. This is the former president who had that power. He says, look, that power, I don't need it. It is not very good. Take that provision there. So we looked at other countries that didn't have a constitution, that same provision, and we found and then nominate a body you can hold accountable, like Minerals Commission or Lands Commission or Natural Resource Commission. Not that many people will be afraid of that as they would be of the president. And you can basically force them to make regular reports, look into their contracts, ask them questions about why they allocated this public land here, or why they did this, they gave this contract to this company and that company. And also, we are also advocating that local communities, and this is thinking about Galamsey, right? That there's a proposal that local communities must be brought into the process of approving concessions, right? So the idea of just awarding a concession in Accra to a mining company, the company comes to the community and just says, just goes to visit the chief as a courtesy and says, I have a concession to mine this thing. And the people are sitting there, they are like, okay, we don't have any power. Now the proposal is that we should include local communities in that approval process, as well as give them a share of the benefits from that. And that maybe that kind of inclusion might help mitigate the Galamsey problem. And then finally, corruption. We have some interesting proposals on corruption. We are proposing, for example, that we merge the Office of Special Prosecutor with the anti-corruption mandate of SHRAJ, take it away from SHRAJ, create one body, and then so that it will be done properly, give them prosecutorial power within the constitution, not donated from the attorney general, so that they can handle prosecutions involving politically exposed persons or corruption and that kind of stuff. And with asset declaration, now we're making it possible for the Auditor General and the new body we are proposing to be able to verify the declarations that you make. Not just verify them in terms of open it and see if the numbers, but invite the public to assist the agency to verify the accuracy. If you know that this person had more assets or less than they have declared, we have included proposals there. So there are a number of things that we're trying to do. The last and final point is all of this is political. What does it mean? The Constitution, the gatekeepers of change in our Constitution are the political class. That's how we've written our Constitution. That's how most constitutions are written. The same people whose power you want to regulate and redistribute and constrain are the same people who are the gatekeepers of the process. The MPs and others are the ones who are going to make decisions around it. So the message then is that if the citizenry are interested in some of these proposals, then the onus is on us as citizens, as civil society, as academia, as trade unions, as faith-based organizations to organize also and express our demand. So otherwise, if you expect the person who is going to lose power to be the one just going to do this by themselves, it's not going to work, right? So the students and others whose future this is about, I think have an obligation to take this process seriously and to really organize when the report is fully released to the public, find the ones that not everything will go through, fine, that's okay, but if you see that something is positive, will improve governance in the country and help all of us, I think you should organize in your own small places, media and others, to put pressure on the political class to make the change that we all need to make Ghana a better place for all of us. Thank you.
Please, one more time, let's give it up for Prof. He's had to condense 600 pages of text into just about 30 minutes public lecture. Most of you were so quiet listening. I'm sure you would have wanted him to keep talking. But you can always catch up on what he said on Pan-African TV. We're live on air and on station's YouTube channel. And for my students, I told you there's an assignment. So I'm directing you to the YouTube channel. I was just sitting there fixing some questions in my head for your exams. That's where they are poised, so please go there and check. Great. At this point, we'll go on and have our conversation. And to lead this, we have invited one of Ghana's most respected voices in public affairs. He's a lawyer, a broadcaster, and he's a passionate advocate for informed public discourse. Now, he's a founding partner of A Partners at Law and previously practiced with the Osu-based firm Gazy, Zuenes, Hughes & Co. He holds an LLM with a practice focus on international, commercial, and investment arbitration. Beyond the courtroom, he's widely known as a media practitioner, trainer, and consultant who has contributed to national conversations on governance, accountability, and the rule of law. He has consulted for and delivered special papers for several professional international institutions, including UNESCO, the Judicial Service of Ghana, Traffic Communications Group Limited, the Ghana Integrity Initiative, the Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition, and CDD Ghana Codeo. He has also collaborated with institutions such as the NCCE and CDD Ghana in promoting good governance, and was a strong advocate in the campaign that led to the passage of Ghana's right to information law. In public service, he has served on boards and committees of University of Education, Winneba, and the University of Ghana, including the Law School and the Ghana School of Languages. He also chaired the GFA Normalization Committee's disciplinary committee that helped restore integrity to Ghana football following the investigative expose by Anas Aremiao Anas. Internationally, he was one of only 2 Africans appointed to the board of the International Lawyers Assisting Workers Network under the auspices of the Solidarity Center, working with the International Trade Union Confederation and the European Trade Union Confederation. He's also a fellow of the Aspen Institute's Africa Leadership Initiative, West Africa, and has been invited as a guest lecturer both locally and internationally, including at the University of Ghana, GIMPA, UPSA, and Smith College in Massachusetts. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Samson Ladi Ayenene, our moderator.
So what I know is that if you gave Prof 6 hours, 8 hours, he could speak to every aspect of the report without flipping it and without feeling tired. Because most of the things there are things that Prof has internalized himself. So what we're going to do next is that he actually covered a greater part of it, even though in the broad strokes. So we'll spend the next about 20 minutes. I'll attempt to spend some 10 minutes with him, and then I would, as it were, hand over the next 10 minutes to you to ask your questions. I suppose many of you have a lot of questions on your minds right now to ask him. So without much ado, I want to believe that Prof has set the stage for us to understand clearly the questions we should be asking him, the probing we should be doing. Because if they have identified all the problems that he speaks about, the question is, what are the solutions that they have through the recommendations? Yes, he's spoken to some of them, but are these solutions tested? Can we say that the solutions will stand the test of time? Many of you are familiar with the sensational bits that were put out in the public. The presidential tenure has been extended to, from 4 to 5 years. So a president has the opportunity to do a total of 10 years, and some of you were angry about it. So what's the problem we found? What was it about? The qualification age to contest as president. They reduced it from 40 so that people who are 35 can also participate. Some say they don't understand what it's about. They say if you are MP, you can't be a minister. If you are MP and you resign in seeking to become a minister, still, we won't give it to you because that was your motivation. You stay out until the term is over. What is all that about? So we just need to understand some of these things. So, Prof, as you mentioned, in 2010, we set up the Constitution Review Commission, Professor Albert Fiajo-led commission. They gave us a 1,000-page report. And as we understand, everything brought us to $6 million plus. Sometimes I think about it and I feel that perhaps it was good that we never implemented it, because they appear to have left a lot of things not done in the way we have seen your committee and others do. So tell us why we should have faith of the political quoting that this one will see light today, because this one is very radical in its approach, and many embrace the solutions you give there, including how to fight corruption, which is our bane. $5 million, $5 billion is lost to corruption each year in this country.
Well, So we've submitted our report. That terminates our mandate, right? So the report is in the bosom of the political class. Our client, so to speak, is the president. He's the one who appointed us, so we delivered the report to the presidency. And of course, we do not expect that either the presidency or the parliament or any member of the political class will agree with everything that is in the report. Now, how to process our recommendations going forward? We don't quite have a precedent for this, right? There was in 2011 an attempt to set up an implementation committee post the white paper. What we understand is that this time around there is not going to be a white paper as such. The Attorney General has made that clear publicly, but there will be a position paper, maybe as well as what legal implications are. But the position paper then would state the government's position or reaction to the various proposals. And I think that's fine. I mean, we do not have a monopoly of wisdom on these things, so they may have a different perspective on something. So it's fine that they reflect on that.
Yeah.
But I do think that the moment, the reason I think I'm a bit more optimistic, we've given them a lot of material. Maybe it's overwhelming, right? Maybe we didn't blank blank sheet and we goes to go the log.
Yeah.
Right?
So just
So maybe a major reset because he got a mandate to do that. I believe that see him running away from that.
in fact, he has committed to this project.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned that CRC's work, K2011, and then going into elections. Of course, we recall how getting public to say how they botched it because that it was not the right time. Then Professor Gokwasari also went to the court until November, October 14, 2015. Then the Supreme Court made a decision to clear the way, which also took us to another election year. All these problems do not exist. These setbacks do not exist.
That's right.
So what will you say about the opportunity now?
I think the opportunity is, I mean, look, the ruling party, as much as I do not think that we should do a constitutional amendment or change process as a one-party project, right? There is at least, if you wanted to amend only the non-entrenched clauses, and many of the things that we have actually proposed, the reform of public sector governance, of local government, of political parties, many of them can be done without a referendum. So even if the government or the political class was referendum shy, didn't want to do a referendum before the next general election because it can be read many different ways, they still have plenty to play with on the entrenched side.
Right.
And I wouldn't say they have not necessarily. There's a certain provision in the Constitution that says that for constitutional amendment purposes, voting in Parliament is by secret vote. So even if you have 2/3, you can't deliver. I mean, the president cannot just rely on NDC votes to push this process through. So you do need to the other side and make sure that there's cross-party consensus on these issues. So I mean, my only prayer really is the point you made, that if the politics of this town remains the way it is, where we polarize every issue, and even if it's good for the nation, you say, well, if I support you, it would mean that the credit goes to Mahama or this one, so I'm not. Then we can get blockage.
Right.
But if the people want it, and if the people demand it, and there appears to be a political cost to not delivering what the people want, I think that the parties would sit up. And I also had conversations with, politicians on both sides of the aisle. We met them in Parliament, the Minority Caucus. I don't see that they are seeing this as a partisan project. Now, I don't know if things will change. But from everything we had with them, it was clear that they saw this as a national project, right, and that they would want to do something about it.
Prof, it has also been suggested that perhaps a new constitutional approach may be an easier route to go, because you acknowledge that when the white paper was issued on Professor Fiajo's work, even though it cherry-picked, we understood that over 80% of the report recommendations were accepted. Yeah. There were over 40 entrenched provisions. There were over 70 non-entrenched provisions. And you knew the problem, that we could not go to a referendum for the entrenched provisions with 40 different questions to be answered. And for the non-entrenched provisions, you have over 70, things to deal with. How are you going to be able to do that? If you're going to do a referendum by each election year, you need how many years? 40 plus years to have achieved that.
So there's one proposal that we have made, which is quite novel. When you look at our constitutional history, we have used every new constitution to reflect on the lessons of the past, starting with 69. So 69 was basically a reaction to some of the excesses of the Nkrumah years. So when you look at 69, one of the ways in which we were trying to inoculate ourselves against the excesses of that period was to over-interpret certain things. So in 69, there were certain provisions you could not think at all, whether or not referendum, right? So there were now a few provisions in the Constitution that the framers of the 69 Constitution made such that they could not be changed, not be amended at all, because the thinking was that they were protecting certain things that were sacrosanct. So we have carried on that tradition to the present, which is that we normally over-entrench. Out of the abundance of caution, we over-entrench. So in the current constitution, the entire chapter on the executive, for example, is entrenched, including the composition of the NDPC, National Security Council, provisions on the Attorney General. Everything there is entrenched. And you ask yourself, was it really necessary to entrench all these things? What we really wanted to protect there was term limits and the term of the president. We do not want presidents to overstay in power. We don't want presidents to stay beyond 2 terms or 4 years. So we decided as a committee that, look, let's go through the Constitution. Let us look at what currently is entrenched, and ask ourselves, is it really necessary to entrench this? If we conclude, based on certain parameters that we applied, that particular provision was not so fundamental, it was not protecting a pillar of our democracy, then we put it aside and created new, we call them entrenched. An entrenched provision, essentially, as I described, would require that to change it, you have to go to a referendum, 40% voter turnout. Of that turnout, 75% must vote to approve. And we said, okay, let's keep the 75% approval, because that protects minority interests, essentially, so that no one party can just go and change anything. But then let's change the forum for those things that we don't think are absolutely necessary to be entrenched. Let's change the forum to Parliament, so that now we would have, instead of, say, 100 entrenched provisions, we would have, say, 15 or just 20. Term limits, judicial, constitutional supremacy, access to high court to challenge, those things that protect very vital constitutional interests, we will do it that way. So what we've done then is that we have created a new channel. If it is accepted, the proposal is accepted, it means that we'll have one referendum where we ask entrenched, put them in a semi-entrenched category, so that next time we want to change them, we don't have to come to a referendum. Okay. And everything else, term limits, referendum. right to vote, referendum, right to form political parties, referendum. All those crucial pillars will remain.
Right.
But things like NDPC or whether or not somebody must be a member of the National Security Council, those things we don't have to go to a referendum.
Right. So I'm going to the audience now, but talking about NDPC, it's part of the solution and national development plan. It's part of the solution to one of the problems that you raised, and we all cry over it. Let's take practical. Before said we needed affordable housing. He started, he didn't finish, he left some unfinished. The new government came, they didn't continue. They had to start their own. You remember STX?
Yeah.
Right. Then eventually they did something called Saglime, which they used our money, over 190 plus million US dollars, sunk into Saglime, targeted at 5,000 housing units. In the end, they gave us 1,300 plus housing units at the cost of the original units. They left. The new government came. It wasn't finished. It was done, but there were facilities that needed to be completed. The new government came. They left it there. For us to know we need in excess of 33 million US dollars in completed. As we speak, Saglime is sitting there, it's rotten. And people are just going there, breaking windows and stealing stuff away. How does the development plan you propose resolve this? Please put your hand up if you have a question. The microphone is coming to you.
So we picked an important lesson from Mongolia, right? So we looked at how have countries dealt with this issue of integrating development planning into constitutional governance. And in Mongolia, there was this interesting provision in the constitution and also a practice. First, the plan must be passed as law, right? So that it has legislative, at least, it has binding effect legislatively, right? And also has bipartisan buy-in. So at the very least, apart from changing some of the composition of the commission and all of those things, the document itself, the framework plan, whether it's indicative plan or whatever, must have bipartisan consensus about the country's development agenda, priorities, timelines, milestones, where we want to go with housing by 2050, all of those kinds of things. And once the parties generally have agreed to the general outlines, then it binds them in terms of the something you can put them. I also proposed in the finance section that there is a connection between the medium-term plan and the budget and the annual budget, so that you can't just have an annual budget that doesn't speak to a plan. So you must have a plan, but the budget that is basically funding it must be tied to your milestones and things set in the plan. So there is a way in which it's been done so that it's mainstreamed into our governance system properly and the parties understand them. And the Directive Principles of State Policy has a provision, the opening chapter provision says it's binding on a number of issues, including parties. So we have asked on that provision to say that if parties are bound by the Directive Principles of State Policy, then those Directive Principles of State Policy must be turned into the manifesto, right? Your manifesto must show us how you are hitting each one of these objectives, social objectives, this. And the President's SONA also, right? The President's annual State of the Nation address, instead of presenting it maybe in the form in which it's done, we should also present it in a SONA, in like the Directive Principles of State Policy. And then when you release a budget, after the budget is approved, currently I've seen it, we've done it before with SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. In 2018, when we did our first budget in 2017 after the change of government to NPP, the Ministry of Finance produced a very interesting document. I'm not sure many people saw it, but they took the budget and then they aligned it with the SDGs and showed which budgets item speaks to SDG 1, SDG 2. That was really brilliant, right? We could do the same thing with our development plan and the budget so that you will show that, okay, this budget, this is what it's achieving. This is the directive principle of state policy. So that's how we are trying to integrate it.
57 at most. Why is that so? We need to understand that. They say there should be a popular approach to amending the constitution. You can get up today if we approve this and mobilize as many as 5% of registered voters who say they want a provision to be amended and to go through the process to be amended. What do you say? What are your questions? Please, your name and your questioning. Straight ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Prof. Aiko, please, my name is Emmanuel Tasun to the Chief. I am very happy to hear that you've proposed that we merge our anti-corruption fighting bodies. A very straightforward question. Please, beyond, could you kindly share with us some specific proposals or solutions? Because over the years, we've had these anti-corruption bodies, and they've had these some of them have had these prosecutorial powers to investigate and suggest for prosecution and all that. But beyond merging them, do we have any concrete suggestions to make them bite and actually enforce? Because in this country, the issue is about enforcement. We have all the beautiful laws, but we are still struggling because the enforcement
how much they call in that way. You might have heard
Those periods, and you cannot explain the growth in your net worth according to income or gift or whatever, it's presumed that you acquired it unlawfully. So that is already there in the Constitution, and we have extended that to say that that gives you a presumption, right, that you can actually do unexplained wealth investigations, you can do lifestyle audits, right? So we are putting a number of things together on the anti-corruption side, not just the merger of the two institutions.
I know that we are pressed for time, but on that first issue, you talk about the EC giving them, taking away the job to regulate the parties as far as the spending is concerned.
Yeah.
We know that already. Our Political Parties Act 2000 provides the EC to do some work, task the EC to do some work, even though the parties are beating that route, because that provision says the parties are the ones who must account for the expenditure. And every 6 months after an election, they are supposed to submit the audit and everything. But we have found that a clever way they do it is that they don't spend through the party, they spend through the candidates. So in Ghana, you need almost 200 million US dollars to prosecute a successful presidential campaign. All the money goes through the candidate, not the party. So it's not the party that accounts. But even that one, the EC is not able to exact accountability. So the question somebody asked is, it's not about the lack of laws, but implementation.
But it's also the has three functions. It's a human rights commission, it's an ombudsman, and it's an anti-corruption commission. If it doesn't do the anti-corruption work, it can still get away with doing the other ones because it's still part of its mandate. What we are thinking is that if the EC is not doing the party financing work, there might be a reason why. Either they don't have the interest, or part of our feeling also is that the EC feels that if they do that work too hard, it brings them in conflict with the parties, and the parties are likely to accuse them of bias. Why is it that you are scrutinizing this party's accounts more than the other? So the EC doesn't really like that kind of work. If you're going to referee the elections among these parties, and then one feels that you are being too hard on them on financing and not the other one, it might actually affect the integrity of the work. So we say, just take that function from the EC, give it to a standalone body.
Let's go to Pastor Tony.
That.
Have you costed the project, and did you leave out LGBT community?
Have we costed the Constitution itself?
The project, like we know now that Professor Fiajo's work is valued at 6 million.
Oh, how much it costs to do it?
Right.
Actually, I saw I think there's an RTI or something request that I saw today from somewhere asking how much the CIC work cost. And I think that, you know, it was sent to Jubilee House. That's the appropriate place to go. We got our budget from Jubilee House in increments. In fact, I must add that when we were set up in January of last year, there was no budget because the government was new. We raised money on our own through CDD. We raised money from the British FCDO and the Swiss to start our work until our first budget came in May. So we actually subsidized a good portion of the work of the committee. I think that the Secretariat will put together the response. I don't know how much it cost. I wasn't handling.
You did zonal interactions. Did you exclude the anti-LGBT community? That's a question.
Why not?
And have you smuggled something in the provisions that is
smuggled
pro-LGBT?
No, I mean, look, LGBT people, they are Ghanaians, right? So we didn't go into this process thinking we are including or excluding anybody. We invited everybody. We had a very good engagement with the faith-based community, the churches, the mosque. So the clerics were there, and I actually saw Fouameni in the crowd. He was present. He had full opportunity to make submissions. I don't think he did make an oral submission. He sent something in writing. Many other people sent other things. But we were not, our task is not to go and exclude any particular group of Ghanaians from the Ghanaian community because one other group feels that they don't belong. That is not our task. We are going into this to make it a democracy participatory and inclusive. We were not going to do that. Did we smuggle anything? No. How do you smuggle something into a transparent document? Our report outlines all the groups that we met, the stakeholder groups. We met a group called Keywatch that had sought audience with us multiple times. They represent a group of people who have a condition called intersex. Now, intersex, as we would later learn from them because we engaged them, they couldn't come in the public forum. We gave them an online audience. There are people who are born with indeterminate sex organs, right? At birth, you can't tell if it's male or female. You have to get to puberty before one of the organs or whatever shows. Our law or administrative practice in Ghana requires, however, that at birth you name the sex of the child, male or female. So it turns out this has been going on, that this group of Ghanaians at birth are subjected to medical surgery because one person thinks that maybe the parent says, oh, Yanuaba, now Yanubema or something, then they operate them. Only for them to, as they mature and they get to puberty, to realize that, okay, the sex organ they were forced was given them was not their proper sex organ. So they're different from, so the person shows full breast and everything, you put a penis there at birth by surgery, right? So this was a very difficult conversation to have. And they brought their lawyers, some doctors, people, and they were there, from Koforidia, from other places, Accra, other places, and said, look, this is not right that we are subjected to these things. And it turns out that even when the LGBT law was going on, they managed to engage Parliament for them to be excluded from that category. So we said, look, you have a very legitimate point here. Now, how exactly do we address it in this process, right? So these are some of the difficult challenges that we had. But the idea that somebody for theological reasons might not like LGBT, right, therefore we should exclude them.
Okay.
I mean, this is not my job.
Right. So I suppose you are clearly aware that this particular, proposal has taken a certain twist and is being misconstrued. So this explanation should be helpful. We now have Mumuni, who wanted to know the winner takes all.
Yeah.
What's the solution, and weave that into the National Development Plan quickly, and then we need two ladies. I'm not taking a gentleman. We're taking only two ladies, and we are done.
look, I think that one of the things we have to be willing to concede is that, yes, we're Ghanaians, maybe culturally special or different, but we are also human beings. We are not very different from other places. These things are not, winner takes all. It's not, we didn't invent it in Ghana. Other countries have had it before. They have overcome it through reform. The idea that we cannot change something because this is how we do it, I think we should rid ourselves of that kind of fatalism. It's almost like we cannot make progress if we think, hey, but I campaign for this person and therefore I must get the job. I think if we have a system, what we are proposing is not saying that party people cannot compete for jobs in the public sector. But all we're saying is that public resources are there for all of us. Jobs, scholarships, admissions, all these things. And that every Ghanaian who qualifies should be able to compete openly and competitively, meritocratically for these things. And as long as we have spelled out the qualifications, so you want a CEO. Look, CEO job in our state enterprises run between 15 to 20, 23% of our GDP. It's significant. Failure in those places can collapse the economy.
That's why you've banned the politicians from doing that.
There's a lot of systemic risk involved there, and the liabilities they incur also are public liabilities, contingent liabilities of the state. So the idea that you should just come, because somebody campaigned for you, you pick them and make them a CEO, very few countries still do that. It's old. It's just too old. Tanzania, others, they've left that kind of game. Many other African countries have left that kind of game. There are Ghanaians all over the place, all over the world, who have competencies we need. They can compete for these.
Thank you very much.
Right? Why are we afraid to just make progress?
Each year, they make losses. They don't make profits, and we still keep them. I don't know what's wrong with us.
In fact, one statistic we got from SIGA is that there are 3 categories of state-owned enterprises. The ones that are wholly owned by the state, the ones that are majority-owned, and the ones that where government only has a minority interest. Can you believe that the one that pays government more money is the one in which government has minority interest? So it should tell you something.
Right. Yes.
Thank you so much, Prof, and thanks for the education. My name is Rose. I believe the key point here is accountability, implementation, and then the real impact it will be on ordinary Ghanaians. I believe, as you rightly said, that Ghana has undertaken constitutional review before, but yet many recommendations remain unimplemented. So my question here is, what makes the 2025 review different, and what guarantee do citizens have that this process will lead to real constitutional change rather than another report? Thank you so much.
Hello, thank you very much. My name is Rahama Isa, and my question has to do with the aspects of natural resource governance. I heard you mention about involving the community when it comes to approval, and I wanted to ask if there will be an aspect that involves training on best practices, especially on health, for the people who are involved. And I also want to ask, I didn't hear any aspect talking about the involvement of foreign nationals in the mining industry in Ghana. And when it comes to enforcement and ensuring that these people are held accountable, is there a new way you have been able to discover to be able to include to the new constitution to ensure that when it comes to enforcement, especially in relation to foreign nationals, we can be rest assured that something better will come?
Thank you very much. So we take these next two questions and we are done. Thank you also very much.
Implementation and why we think this is different. I'm not so sure that this is necessarily different. I think that what we are hoping and what we are appealing, the plea that we are putting out to Ghanaians is that, look, you have to take an interest in this thing. Constitutions matter. How constitutions are designed matter. They change the nature of the incentives politicians face, and it's about our future. So I think what we are hoping is that people like Samson and others, and Bernard and others will stay very engaged, enlighten the population, get you interested in this enough for you to really follow the process closely, organize yourselves, and let your political parties and the class know that this is about you. I mean, constitutions may be implemented mostly by politicians and bureaucrats, but the effects are on us. The outcomes are experienced by us. So I think we were hoping for public ownership of this process, and which is why I'm happy that a process like this is happening in a place like here. It would require an informed citizenry, and this is part of that process. That then segues into the last point about local communities and their involvement in decisions about mining in their communities. When we went to a lot of places, you know, we heard stories about how the presence of mines is just causing lots of, beyond galamsey, teenage pregnancy, absenteeism in school, you know, teenage problems, that just once a mine shows up in some place, just the youth just completely become a problem, right? So we heard all these things. And we're saying, look, if you're going to have local communities involved in making decisions, it shouldn't be, it's not just the chief making a decision with the company, it shouldn't be just the assembly, but we must create, and we have let that process for further exploration by parliament. But we have to design a participatory process where EPA, for example, will give the community information, the right information about the effects of mining. It should be informed decision, right? So they must be informed by the appropriate government agencies about what the mine will do to them, what is going to be the effect, so that they can make an informed decision whether to invite the mine into the community and on what terms, right? So those are some of the things that we're proposing, that it's not just go there and say the assembly says yes, because we know that they can be easily influenced, right? So a number of the reforms we are proposing would require active citizenship, civic activism, engagement, information, knowledge sharing. And if we put all these pieces together, we're not trying to create a perfect constitution. We're just solving basic problems of governance. And I think that our aim is just to make incremental progress. If we get even 30%, 40% of what we are asking for, knowing the policies of it, maybe best for now. And we will still push for the next one and the next one. But I think that we have to start from somewhere. You know, we have great opportunity as a country to leapfrog. Seriously, we can make the headway we want to make.
Right.
But we have to govern this place differently. It's just too poorly governed.
Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause for our distinguished speaker, Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh. And as you can see, in 2010, the agenda was transforming Ghana's constitution from a political to a developmental, constitution. And then they took the baton, and what are they saying? That they are transforming Ghana from an electoral democracy to a developmental democracy. Guess what? If you don't participate, if you don't get active, these things that are demands arising from the people will not see the light of day, because the politicians are comfortable with what the system may be now. So you need to be active and participate in it. Thank you also very much. I'll hand over to the MC.
Please don't get tired. The applause should be louder than this. You have had tons and tons of knowledge. We could write books and books from this engagement. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Samson, for the engagement. So we'll take the chairman's closing remarks, and right after that, we'll take the vote of thanks. We'll have the closing prayer, and then we'll have a group photograph. As you are aware, we're very close to the end of the program, and so don't rush off yet. We'll just take these three segments, and then we can formally close. So please, with a okay, so now I can invite our chairman, Dr. Bading, to give us his remarks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor. As we bring this event to a close, I'd like to express our sincere appreciation to our distinguished speaker for sharing his findings and recommendations of the Constitutional Review Committee with us. I'm, however, a bit disappointed in the findings. Well, to begin with, I don't really know where you people were, where the committee was meeting. I mean, were you just meeting at Kempinski and some other places? You did that come into my neck of the woods? I never experienced, never felt you. I don't know, and I'm sure most of you people feel like that. Yeah. All right. And my disappointment also is that the findings appear to be short, or rather short, on economics. I mean, it's more on non-economic matters. But you see, the disconnect between the Constitution and the people's feeling is economics. And that really should be our focus. You know, I have said, and I've done all kinds of campaigns. You know, this economy, what is central to this economy is stable currency, or it's the lack of stable currency. Well, I didn't hear him. All right. What is it? Okay, very well. Then I think you've done a good job. I think you've done a good job. What about I heard you also began you did begin to talk about debt exchange, domestic debt exchange program, but I didn't see how you ended. What, I don't know, but if you did make some calls on the DDEP, I'll also commend you for that, because you know that really shouldn't have happened, and it's really condescending. I mean, you know, as a state, we must not really default. Okay. Also, I was also concerned about taxation. It looks like in this country we are overly taxed. Overly. No, overly taxed. Well, even at our ports, try to bring something in, and you go through about 30 tax gates. And these are all compounded. These are issues that is affecting our survival and our future. Are you with me? Also, I didn't hear anything on government being ready to, if you will, springboard small businesses. Yeah? Because if we will prosper, or if we will progress, it will come from, you know, from enterprise, people trying, and the government must be there to help. We've seen in some economies, governments have been big on small business administration. Are you with me? I'm hoping that you have some of that recommendation in there. All right. Okay, so, but central to my concern is stable currency. And I think I need to, maybe I'll, if you can furnish me a copy, I mean, I'll appreciate it. Huh? All right. Okay, so notwithstanding my concerns, I believe today's discussion has reminded us that the constitutional reform goes beyond legal provisions. It is about strengthening institutions, deepening democratic accountability, and ensuring that governance framework of our nation continues to serve its people effectively. We are also grateful to our moderator for guiding a thoughtful and engaging conversation, and to all participants for contributing to the quality of dialogue through your presence and questions. Events such as this reaffirm the important role universities play as spaces for informed debate, critical inquiry, and responsible national conversation. On behalf of the university, I thank you all for participating and wish you a pleasant evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair, for your closing remarks and your concerns. But of course, we can always continue the conversation outside this space. I invite Trifina Ifia Jan, to give us the closing, the vote of thanks. The vote of thanks.
Good evening. With all due protocols observed, on behalf of the School of Communications Studies, we express our deepest gratitude to our distinguished guest speaker, Professor Henry Kwesi Prempeh, for sharing his profound knowledge, valuable insights with us this evening. Thank you, sir. We are truly grateful for your time you have taken to enlighten and inspire us. And we are also thankful to be the first institution to have a public lecture after the review. We are equally grateful to our moderator, Mr. Samson Ladi Anyenemi, for guiding the discussion so effectively and ensuring that the conversation was engaging, thought-provoking, and beneficial to all of us present here today. Our sincere appreciation also goes to the leadership of Wisconsin International University College, particularly President Dr. Lawrence Kanai, Acting Registrar Madam Joyce Latte, Dean of Communications Madam Baba Kofi, for continually supporting academic engagement and intellectual dialogue within the university community. We also acknowledge the presence and contributions of the chairperson, Dr. John Baden, our respected deans, heads of department, faculty members, and the legal fraternity, the media, and all invited guests whose presence has made today's lecture meaningful and successful. To my fellow students, thank you for your participation and keen interest in the issues that shape the governance and democratic future of our country, Ghana. Finally, we appreciate everyone who has contributed in diverse ways to making this public lecture a success. Once again, we say thank you. Have a pleasant evening.
And thank you to Trifina for giving us a short vote of thanks. We'll take the closing prayer, and once again, will be delivered by the school chaplain, Reverend Yorson. Thank you for coming. My name is Kofi Bwedi, and I'm grateful for your support.
Shall we rise for the closing prayer? Heavenly Father, we are most grateful to you for having been with us through this conversation and having granted the speakers the grace to enlighten us on these changes and these proposals to our constitutions. We are praying that as this constitution, as these reviews have been presented to the appropriate authorities, may they wholeheartedly, with the interests of the citizens and the people and the nation, lead, oh God, even in the processes of the changes, that as we receive a new version and the changes, it will lead our nation to prosperity and the good success that we are all praying for. We pray, Jehovah, as we live here, may your presence go with us, send everybody safely to their destinations, their homes, safely. In the name of Jesus, we pray with thanksgiving. Amen.
Great, thank you. Don't leave yet. The last item is a group photograph. And so we'll have the school management, the president, deans, and administration will take a photo with Prof. and Samson right up here. So Can we please have the school administration, the deans, and the president please come up so we quickly take the group photo with Prof. Right after that, we'll have faculty joining these for the photograph, and then we'll have students. So don't leave yet. You need to be captured in this historic.
Truly African.
My friend Grandpa.